During a family call, my brother declared, "We're better off without your drama." They all agreed. I was hosting the line. I disconnected permanently, along with the shared streaming accounts they relied on. I, 32M, was hosting the family group call when my brother said we're all better off without my drama. Everyone agreed. So I gave them what they wanted. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop open, half listening to my family argue about Thanksgiving plans on the video call I'd set up and was hosting from my account. My coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept the mug in my hands anyway, something to hold on to while my mother went on about seating arrangements and my sister-in-law complained about dietary restrictions. This was normal. Every few weeks, someone would schedule a family call, and because I had the premium video conferencing subscription, it always ended up being hosted through my account. Nobody ever asked if I minded. They just sent me the time, and I sent them the link. My brother was in the middle of explaining why he couldn't bring anything to dinner this year when my younger sister interrupted him. She brought up the incident from 3 months ago, the one I thought we'd all moved past. Apparently, we hadn't. She reminded everyone how I'd caused a scene at my nephew's birthday party by leaving early. I'd explained at the time that I had a work emergency, a genuine crisis that required me to be on a call with clients in a different time zone. But my sister had decided it was a deliberate slight against the family, and she'd been holding on to it ever since. I tried to explain again that it hadn't been personal, that I'd apologized multiple times, but she talked over me. Then my other sister joined in, mentioning how I'd missed their daughter's recital 2 years ago. I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia at the time, something they all knew, but apparently that detail didn't matter anymore. My father stayed quiet, which was typical for him. He never got involved in these things, just let them play out while he sat there looking uncomfortable. Then my brother sighed. That particular sigh he'd perfected over the years, the one that meant he was about to say something he thought was profound. He said that maybe, just maybe, we were all better off without my drama. That perhaps the family would be more peaceful if I just took a step back from everything. I waited for someone to disagree. I waited for my mother to tell him that was too harsh, or for my father to finally speak up and defend me. Instead, there was silence, and then my younger sister agreed. She said she'd been thinking the same thing, that every family gathering seemed to have some issue that traced back to me. My other sister chimed in that she was tired of walking on eggshells, wondering if I'd actually show up to things or if I'd bail at the last minute with some excuse. My mother added, in that careful voice she used when she didn't want to seem like the bad guy, that maybe some distance would be healthy for everyone, that maybe I needed time to work on myself before I could fully participate in family events. I sat there, looking at all their faces on my screen, in the meeting I was hosting, on the platform I was paying for, and something inside me just went quiet and cold. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I asked them if they were sure that was what they wanted, and my brother said yes, it was probably for the best. I told them I understood, and then I ended the call. For about 30 seconds, I just stared at the blank screen. Then I opened my account settings and changed the password. I removed every family member who had access to my video conferencing subscription. Then I opened my streaming accounts. All of them. The premium movie service, the sports package, the exclusive shows platform, the music streaming family plan. I'd been paying for everything for the past 4 years, ever since I'd gotten my promotion and could afford it. My siblings had never offered to contribute, and I'd never asked. It felt like a small thing I could do for the family, a way to stay connected. I removed every single person from every single account. My parents, my siblings, their spouses, even my nieces and nephews who used the kids' profiles. My phone started ringing within 10 minutes. It was my younger sister. I declined the call. She called again. I declined again. Then came the text messages asking what was going on. Why couldn't she access the streaming service? Was there a technical issue? I didn't respond. My brother called next, then my other sister. I let them all go to voicemail. By the next morning, I had 43 unread messages in the family group chat. I opened it once, saw them progressing from confused to annoyed to angry, and then I muted the conversation. My mother called from my father's phone, probably assuming I was ignoring her number. I answered that one. She asked what I was doing, why I'd cut everyone off from the accounts. I reminded her of what they'd all said on the call, that they wanted distance from my drama, that they were better off without me involved. I told her I was simply giving them what they'd asked for. She tried to backtrack then, saying they hadn't meant it like that, that I was overreacting. I asked her if she disagreed with them during the call. She went quiet. I told her that I loved her, but I needed to take that step back like she'd suggested. Then I hung up. The messages got more aggressive over the next few days. My brother sent a long text about how I was being childish and petty, how cutting off streaming services was a ridiculous overreaction to a simple family conversation. My younger sister called me selfish and vindictive. My other sister said I was proving their point about being dramatic. None of them apologized for what they'd said. None of them acknowledged that maybe telling someone the family was better off without them was cruel. They were just angry that there were consequences. My brother-in-law, who'd been silent during the original call, sent me a message saying I was being unreasonable and that the kids were upset about losing their shows. I replied asking why he couldn't pay for his own family's entertainment, and he didn't respond. After a week, my mother tried a different approach. She called and left a voicemail saying that maybe everyone had been too harsh, that families should be able to work through disagreements. She asked if I'd consider coming to Thanksgiving, that it wouldn't be the same without me. I didn't call back, but I did send a text. I told her I appreciated the olive branch, but I meant what I said about taking a step back. I said I needed time, and I needed them to understand why what they'd said had hurt me. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine. She replied asking how long I planned to keep this up. I told her I didn't know. Thanksgiving came and went. I spent it with my girlfriend and her family, people who actually seemed to enjoy having me around. My phone was mercifully quiet that day. I'd half expected a barrage of guilt trip messages, but there was nothing. My girlfriend had known about all of this from the beginning. She'd been in the next room when the call happened, and she'd seen my face when I walked out of the kitchen afterward. She'd asked if I was okay, and I told her I didn't know yet. She supported my decision to cut contact, but she also asked me what I wanted the endgame to be. Did I want an apology? Did I want to reconcile eventually? Or was this a permanent break? I told her I honestly didn't know. I just knew I was tired of being the one who always had to swallow my hurt feelings, who had to be the bigger person, who had to forgive and forget, while everyone else got to say whatever they wanted without consequence. December rolled around, and my mother called again. This time she actually apologized. She said she'd been thinking about everything, and she realized they'd been taking me for granted. She said that what my brother had said was cruel, and she should have spoken up. I asked her if she'd said any of this to my siblings, if she'd told them they needed to apologize too. She admitted she hadn't, that she didn't want to cause more conflict. I told her that was part of the problem, that everyone was always so worried about keeping the peace that I was expected to just absorb whatever anyone said to me. But the moment I stood up for myself, I was the one causing drama. She didn't have an answer for that. Christmas was harder. My parents had always hosted, and despite everything, I felt guilty about not being there. But I also knew that if I showed up, everyone would expect things to go back to normal. They'd expect me to pretend nothing had happened, to laugh at my brother's jokes, and help my sisters with the dishes, and act like they hadn't collectively decided I was the problem with the family. I sent my parents a gift card and a card that said I loved them and wished them a Merry Christmas. I didn't send anything to my siblings. My phone stayed quiet on Christmas Day until evening when my father called. That was unusual. My father never called me directly. He told me he missed me, that Christmas hadn't felt right without me there. He said he was sorry for not speaking up during the call, that he'd been a coward. He said he'd watched me pull away from the family over the years, always being the one to compromise, always being the one to smooth things over, and he'd never realized how much I'd been carrying until I finally put it down. I didn't realize I was crying until I couldn't speak clearly enough to respond. He told me to take whatever time I needed, but that his door was always open if I wanted to talk, just the two of us. No pressure, no expectations. That conversation meant more to me than any of the others combined. Update 1. It's been 3 months since I posted originally, and people have been asking for an update, so here it is. January was quiet. My siblings seemed to finally understand that I wasn't coming back on their terms. The angry messages stopped, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. My mother called once a week, usually just to chat about nothing important, and I appreciated that she wasn't pushing me to forgive everyone and come back to family dinners. My father and I started having breakfast together every other Sunday. Just the two of us at a diner halfway between our houses. We didn't talk about the family situation much. Mostly we talked about work and sports and random things we'd seen on the news. It was nice. I couldn't remember the last time I'd spent time with my father without the buffer of the entire family around us. In mid-February, my younger sister reached out. Not with an apology, but with a request. She wanted to know if I'd be willing to help her husband with a job connection. Apparently, he'd been laid off, and she remembered that I knew people in his industry. I sat with that message for 2 days before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her experience what it felt like to need something and be met with silence. But I'm not built that way, and I hated that I wasn't built that way. I told her I'd make some calls, but I also told her that reaching out only when she needed something wasn't the path back to a relationship with me. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. No acknowledgement, no reflection. Just a thumbs up. I made the calls anyway. Her husband got an interview, and eventually a job offer. She sent me a thank you text that felt perfunctory and obligatory. I didn't respond. My brother tried a different approach in March. He sent me a long email about how family was supposed to forgive each other, about how holding grudges was unhealthy, about how life was too short to stay angry. It was full of platitudes and completely devoid of any actual apology or acknowledgement of what he'd said. At the end, he mentioned that he'd had to buy his own streaming subscriptions, and it was expensive, especially with 3 kids. He suggested that maybe we could split the cost of a family plan, to save everyone money. I deleted the email. My other sister didn't reach out at all, which somehow felt more honest than the others. At least she wasn't pretending to care about reconciliation while really just wanting something from me. In April, my nephew had another birthday. My younger sister sent me an invitation to the party, a mass text to the whole family. I didn't respond, and I didn't go. I did send a gift directly to my nephew with a card. He was 8, and none of this was his fault. My sister sent me a message afterwards saying it had been hurtful that I'd skipped another family event, that my nephew had asked where I was. I replied that I'd been clear about needing distance, and that showing up to a party wasn't the same as rebuilding trust. She said I was being difficult on purpose. Maybe I was. Or maybe I was finally setting boundaries, and she didn't like how that felt. My girlfriend and I got engaged in May. It was a small moment, just the 2 of us on a hiking trail we'd been wanting to try. Nothing elaborate, just perfect. I told my parents right away. My mother cried happy tears and asked if she could see the ring, so we drove over that evening. My father shook my hand and hugged me, and told me he was proud of me. It felt genuine and warm. I didn't tell my siblings. My mother asked if I was going to, and I said I hadn't decided yet. She looked sad but didn't push. They found out anyway, because my mother posted a congratulations message on social media. The family group chat that I'd muted months ago suddenly lit up with notifications. I opened it long enough to see a string of congratulations messages that felt hollow and performative. My brother added that we should all get together to celebrate. I left the group chat, just exited it completely. My brother called immediately. I answered, curious what he'd say. He asked why I'd left the chat, said it was a family group and I was being immature. I told him that I was done performing for an audience that had made it clear they didn't value me. He said I was making everything about me, as usual. I hung up. My younger sister sent a private message saying she wanted to be involved in wedding planning, that she'd always imagined helping plan her brother's wedding. I reminded her that she'd agreed I was better off at a distance from the family. She said that was different, that was months ago, and people say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. I told her that maybe she should think about why she'd been so frustrated with me that she'd agreed I was the problem, and whether she'd actually resolved any of those feelings or if she just wanted access to a happy occasion. She didn't respond. My other sister sent a brief congratulations text and nothing else. I actually appreciated that more than the others. At least she was consistent. Wedding planning moved forward. My fiancée asked how many of my family members I wanted to invite. I told her my parents, definitely. Maybe my siblings, I hadn't decided. She said it was my choice, and she'd support whatever I decided. In June, my mother asked if we could all sit down together, the whole family, and try to work things out before the wedding. She said it would mean a lot to her to have all her children in the same room again, getting along. I asked her if my siblings had actually done any self-reflection, if they'd acknowledged what they'd said and why it was hurtful. She admitted that they still thought I was overreacting, but that maybe if we all just talked it through, we could find common ground. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't interested in a conversation where I was expected to justify my hurt feelings to people who still thought they'd done nothing wrong. She cried, and I felt like a monster, but I didn't back down. My father called me later that night. He said he understood my position, and he wasn't going to push me to reconcile on anyone's timeline but my own. He said he'd talk to my mother, help her understand. I thanked him. Update 2. The wedding was 2 weeks ago. I'm writing this from my honeymoon, which feels surreal and wonderful, and like maybe I finally have the life I always wanted, just not with the family I was born into. I did invite my siblings to the wedding. After a lot of thought and a lot of conversations with my now wife and my therapist, I decided that I wanted to give them one more chance. Not because I thought they deserved it, but because I needed to know I'd done everything I could. The invitations went out in July. Formal, beautiful invitations that my wife had spent weeks choosing. My siblings each received one addressed to their families. I didn't include a personal note or a phone call, just the invitation. My brother was the first to RSVP. He marked yes for his whole family, for people. No message, just the response card sent back. My younger sister called instead of sending the card. She asked if this meant things were okay between us now, if I was ready to let the past go. I told her that inviting her to my wedding wasn't the same as absolving her of what she'd said, but that I wanted my family there on my day. She said that sounded fair, and then asked if there was a registry. I gave her the website and ended the call. My other sister didn't respond at all for 3 weeks. Finally, she sent the card back marked no, with a note that said she had a conflict that weekend. It was my wedding date. Unless she had another wedding or a funeral, she could have made it work. But I understood what she was really saying, and honestly, it stung less than I expected. At least she was honest. The wedding itself was beautiful. My wife was radiant. The weather was perfect. Everything went smoothly. My parents were emotional in the way parents are at weddings. My father's toast was short and sweet and made me tear up. My brother and his family came. They stayed for the ceremony and the dinner, but left before the dancing started. My brother found me before they left, shook my hand, said congratulations, and told me it had been a nice wedding. It was cordial and distant and felt like exactly what our relationship had become. My younger sister and her husband stayed longer. She drank too much wine and got sentimental, told me she missed me, that she wished things could go back to how they used to be. I told her they couldn't, but maybe we could build something new if she was willing to actually work on it. She said she'd try, but I could tell she still didn't really understand what that meant. None of them apologized. Not once, not even in the soft glow of wedding sentimentality. But here's the thing. I realized I didn't need them to anymore. Somewhere in the past 9 months, I'd stopped waiting for them to understand what they'd done to me. I'd stopped needing their validation or their acknowledgement. I'd built a life that didn't require them to be better than they were. My wife's family embraced me from the start. They asked about my work and my hobbies and actually listened to my answers. They included me in their group chats and their holiday plans without expecting me to earn my place. They treated me like I mattered, like my presence was wanted rather than tolerated. I have friends who showed up to my wedding with handmade gifts and heartfelt cards and who danced with me until midnight. People who've been there through the past year, who've supported me without expecting anything in return. My father and I still have breakfast every other Sunday. That relationship has deepened into something I treasure. My mother and I talk regularly, and while she still wishes things were different with my siblings, she stopped trying to force it. As for my siblings and the streaming accounts, they never came up again. I assume they all got their own. The family group video calls don't happen anymore, at least not with me on them. I suspect they still have their calls, just hosted by someone else. I don't feel angry anymore. Mostly I feel free. Free from the expectation that I'd always be the one to bend, to accommodate, to forgive without receiving apology. Free from the weight of trying to maintain relationships with people who only valued me for what I provided rather than who I was. Someone asked in the comments of my original post what I wanted the endgame to be. I finally have an answer. I wanted to stop sacrificing my peace for people who wouldn't even acknowledge they'd taken it from me. And I got that. Not through some grand reconciliation or tearful apology, but through simply choosing myself. If my siblings ever do the work to understand what happened, if they ever genuinely want to rebuild, I'll consider it. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not putting my life on hold waiting for it. I'm married to an incredible woman. I have a good relationship with my parents. I have friends who feel like chosen family. I have a career I'm proud of and hobbies I enjoy, and a life that feels full rather than draining. That family call was the worst thing that happened to me that year, but it might also have been the catalyst I needed to finally build the boundaries I should have had all along. To anyone else out there who's been told they're too sensitive, too dramatic, too much, you're not. And you don't owe anyone access to your life if they refuse to treat you with basic respect and care. Even if they're family. Especially if they're family. If you'd like to see more stories like this, a gentle tap on the subscribe button would mean the world to us.